Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Hey there! Just a quick heads up. I am not much of a storyteller, but this tale is something else. So sit back and let me regale you with a saga of the entitled Karen I encountered at Walmart. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let me give you some context. You see, I'm not in the best of health. I've got this genetic joint deterioration thing going on, kind of like arthritis but with a generous serving of never-ending pain. To top it off, I've had 2 back surgeries and I rely on a trusty cane to get around. Alright, let's get into it. It was the eve of Thanksgiving and my brother and I were on a mission to grab some last-minute supplies for our family gatherings. You know, pumpkin pie, seasonings, snacks, and all that good stuff. I had my cane in hand navigating the aisles while my brother pushed the cart. I prefer not to use those motorized carts. I feel like there are folks out there who need them more than I do, unless I'm having a really bad pain day. I do my best to stay on my own 2 feet. And that's when it all started, folks. Enter the entitled boy, a sprightly lad of maybe 7 to 10 years old. As I was making my way, the entitled brat sidled up to me, eyeing my cane with intrigue. He chimed in, "That's a nice stick." I looked down at him and smiled. "Thank you, but it's a cane, not a stick." He returned a smile. "Can I have it?" Now, my cane wasn't just an old walking stick, it was handcrafted and made especially for me by my now departed best friend. Crafted from cherry wood, it sported intricate Celtic designs all the way down and featured a special rubber tip. It held sentimental value beyond words. I replied kindly, "I'm sorry, but it's not a toy, and I needed to walk." The kid's smile faded and he walked away. Little did I know that this encounter was just the tip of the iceberg. About 5 minutes later, I hear a rather irritating "excuse me," and I turned to my right and what was met was the sight of the most horrifying Karen I'd ever laid eyes on. Our entitled Karen, complete with the infamous "can I speak to your manager" haircut and a scowl that could curdle milk. She began her tirade. "Did you just tell my son he couldn't have your cane?" I replied, "That's correct." She interrupted me. "That's just a prop. It's not a real cane. Let my son have it." Clearing my throat, I explained, "Ma'am, this is a specially designed medical cane specifically made for me to help me walk. It was crafted by a dear friend of mine." But she interrupted me yet again. "Don't lie to me. I've seen medical canes, and I know that's not one. Now give it here." My brother saw this escalating and decided to step in. He took the cart and I retreated to a different aisle. After some time, my brother caught up with me and reported that the entitled Karen had left. I thought that was the end of it, but boy was I wrong. About 5 to 10 minutes later, without any warning, I felt the fridge had collided with my backside. I was sent flying into a Christmas display, and as I lay there in a heap, the entitled Karen was making a beeline for my precious cane. I was in excruciating pain, struggling to suppress a howl of agony. My brother, on the other hand, wasn't having it. He pushed her back into the main aisle, and she landed roughly on her rear end. Cue the howling and screaming. Karen was now loudly proclaiming that we had assaulted her. Meanwhile, I was still struggling to regain my composure, my pain levels off the charts. A helpful Walmart employee rushed over to check on me, but the entitled Karen had already garnered a crowd of sympathizers, all convinced that we were the villains in the story. I couldn't speak, still grappling with the overwhelming pain. However, my brother was a rock. He calmly explained the situation to the Walmart manager, Walmart security, and the ever-helpful Walmart employee. In the midst of all this, the entitled Karen continued to spin her yarns one after the other. Eventually, the police and paramedics arrived to assess the situation. I was finally starting to regain my senses, so I was far from comfortable. The paramedics were checking me out while the entitled Karen, well, she needed more than just a medical check. She seemed like she could use a dose of common sense and decency. A police officer and the Walmart security guard took a trip to the back to review the store security cameras. When they returned, the entitled Karen was still in full-blown meltdown mode, screeching, "Arrest them! Arrest those horrible men for what they did to me and my boy." The police officer approached me as I lay on a stretcher. "Do you wish to press charges?" he asked. And that's when the entitled Karen decided to make a run for it, leaving her bewildered kid behind. She bolted for the exit, but her escape plan was foiled when the security guard and the police tackled her in the parking lot. Back inside, the Walmart manager and employee insisted on paying for my groceries and reiterated that they didn't condone Karen's behavior. As far as employees go, they deserve a standing ovation for their top-notch customer service. I was eventually loaded into the back of an ambulance. Medically, I was okay, though I was left with a throbbing backside and a lingering sense of disbelief. As the ambulance pulled away, I could still hear Karen wailing at the top of her lungs in a police cruiser. She kept screaming, "I was assaulted!" I also would like to point out that medically I'm okay. However, please, for the love of God, if you're reading this, don't ever act like this to a person or to other people. Hello there, fellas. Let me tell you a little story about something that happens to my fiancé and me more often than you'd expect. You see, my fiancé has a condition called paresthesia neurological, a fancy name for a rare neurological issue caused by not one but two nasty car accidents. This condition makes it quite painful and challenging for her to walk long distances. However, her disability isn't always visible. And that's when we often run into what I call the disability police. It all started on a regular grocery shopping day. We live in a little Cape Cod town where everyone seems to know everyone else. We frequent a local supermarket with powered scooters available for shoppers, and it's a real lifesaver for my fiancé. On this particular day, I parked our car in a marked disabled parking spot, as we always do, with our disabled parking tag proudly hanging from the rear view mirror. I got out of the car and began my routine of opening the passenger door for my fiancé. As I helped her out of the car, we heard a loud and accusatory voice behind us. "You're not disabled. You can't park in that disabled parking spot." So I turned to see a woman, presumably in her 50s, standing there with an angry scowl on her face. She was the embodiment of what I'd come to call the disability police. These self-appointed vigilantes feel the need to pass judgment on anyone they believe doesn't fit their narrow view of disability. My fiancé, who had just stepped out of the car, gave me a wary smile and whispered, "Here we go again, Dave." I nodded, trying to keep my cool. "Ma'am, my fiancé has a disability. We have a valid parking tag. Her condition isn't always obvious." The woman seemed to ignore my words entirely. She pointed at me and continued her tirade. "I saw you walk into the store without any problem." This was the same old song and dance. The disability police often seem to believe that if they couldn't see a visible disability, it didn't exist. I decided to ignore her and focused on getting my fiancé settled into one of the scooters. I knew from experience that engaging with these people often led nowhere. As I wheeled the scooter out of the store and toward our car, the woman started to follow us, her voice growing louder. I could feel my frustration building, but I kept my composure. We've been through this before and we had a system in place for handling these situations. I parked the scooter next to our car, turned to my fiancée, and told her to stay in the car. She gave me a reassuring nod as I saw a police car pulling up. The disability policewoman continued her rant to the approaching officer. "Officer, this man took one of the scooters for disabled people. He's trying to steal it." The officer, a friendly face we'd come to know in our small town, approached our car. He looked inside, recognized my fiancé and said, "Hi X, thanks for the cookies you brought to the police station last week. We really loved them." My fiancée loved to bake and cook, and she often prepared cookies and brownies to show her appreciation for our local police officers and firefighters. She didn't see it as a big deal, she just considered it being a good neighbor and realized that these folks didn't receive hefty salaries and deserved some appreciation. The disability police woman's mouth dropped open in disbelief. She clearly hadn't expected the officer to greet my fiancé by name, let alone thank her for the cookies. The officer then helped her out of the car and onto the scooter. She looked like a child caught misbehaving, ready to crawl into a hole and disappear. The officer turned to her and in a tone reminiscent of scolding a misbehaving child said, "Miss, I suggest you go somewhere else. Mind your own business and stop harassing my friends." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the woman to stew in her embarrassment. She got into her car and drove off, defeated. My fiancé and I exchanged a look, and I couldn't help but chuckle. And that's how we once again encountered the disability police and how a batch of cookies managed to sweeten up the situation. Around Christmas time, I decided to treat myself to a brand new motorcycle. I've been eyeing one for years and it felt like the perfect time to finally make that dream come true. I figured I'd use one of my unused credit cards for all the gear, gas, and other expenses that come with owning a motorcycle. Little did I know that my Christmas surprise would turn into a thrilling adventure, one that I couldn't have predicted. I made a few online charges from reputable retailers to get all the necessary gear and prepared for an epic 900-mile road trip. Everything seemed perfect until about a week after my trip. I received a fraud alert from Bank of America. The text messages detailed the last 5 charges, all of them from a gas station. At first, I wasn't too concerned since I had indeed made those charges during my trip. However, the next day I received a call from Bank of America's fraud department. "Hello? This is Lisa from Bank of America's fraud department. We noticed some unusual activity on your credit card account. Can you verify these charges totaling $2,100? Lisa inquired. My heart skipped a beat. $2,100? That's impossible. I couldn't make those charges on my motorcycle trip, I replied, my voice filled with anxiety. Lisa calmly assured me, I understand your concern, sir. We'll investigate this immediately and get back to you. Thankfully, they refunded the disputed amount, and they also contacted the 2 retailers involved. They issued me a new credit card, and I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the matter had been resolved. I was almost certain that I'd encountered a credit card skimmer at one of those gas stations. However, just when I thought the ordeal was behind me, about a month later, another suspicious charge appeared on my credit card statement. It seemed that some retailers had a Visa agreement that allowed them to force charges through, even with old credit card numbers. Frustration bubbled up within me as I realized I wasn't out of the wood yet. Determined to uncover the truth, I called the first retailer, which we will call Retailer 1. The automated system recognized my phone number and greeted me with familiarity. This was strange since I had never even heard of this company before. It wasn't my name that the automated system addressed, and I had owned my phone number for over 12 years. With a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, I decided to dive deeper. I asked the automated system to provide me with an order history. Lo and behold, the date and purchase amount matched exactly what was on my credit card statement. I decided to speak to a live operator to verify the shipping address since I claimed I never received the order. The shipping address turned out to be linked to a specific country importer. This raised further suspicions in my mind. It became apparent that something fishy was going on, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it yet. Then a realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. Skimmers do not have the capability to obtain a phone number from a magnetic strip on a credit card. That narrowed down the list of suspicious transactions to 2 that I had made over the phone. One was with Geico, and the other was with a motorcycle parts company, which we will call Motorcycle Parts Company or MPC for short. I decided to call retailer number 2, which was MPC, based out of New Jersey. Coincidentally, the shipping address for the fraudulent charges. I didn't beat around the bush. I was straightforward with the operator about why I was calling. Listen, I said firmly. I believe someone used my credit card to make unauthorized charges with your company. I need information about the transaction, specifically the phone number used. The operator, a bit taken aback, complied with my request and provided the phone number. It had a New Jersey area code. Armed with this new information, I conducted a reverse lookup of the number. Finally, I had a name to connect to the thief. Excitement coursed through me as I continued my investigation. I managed to find her on LinkedIn, and her profile listed MPC as her employer. I was getting closer to unraveling the mystery, and it was clear that this entitled fraudster was about to meet her match. The next step was to call MPC, and as luck would have it, she answered the phone again. I asked to speak to a manager, but the operator informed me that he was conveniently out of town. She took down my callback number and left a note for him. I didn't give up that easily. The following week, I called again. Once again, she picked up the phone. This time, I was told that the manager was in a meeting. It was becoming evident that she was recognizing my phone number and deliberately screening my calls. On the third, I decided to take a different approach. I obtained the Google Voice number and set my location to Alabama. With my best deep southern accent, I called again around 4 p.m. Hey there, sugar. I was talking to the manager earlier and we got disconnected plus her heart. Could y'all patch me through to him again? And to my delight, she agreed. And I finally managed to get a hold of the manager. I laid out my case and presented the evidence I had gathered. He seemed genuinely shaken and betrayed. It turned out that the thief was none other than a customer service manager. He assured me, I will handle this internally and she won't be a problem anymore. Feeling a sense of triumph, I knew that justice was finally being served. The manager informed me that he would let her go the next morning after she confessed to the fraudulent activities. It was a small victory, but one that meant a lot to me. With the internal matter resolved at MPC, I decided it was time to involve the authorities. I headed down to my local police department to file a report, armed with all the evidence I had collected. The detective on duty raised an eyebrow when I presented my case. Wow, you've practically handed her to us on a silver platter, she remarked. She took my statement and all the evidence I had gathered and informed me that she would forward it to the appropriate New Jersey precinct so they could file charges against the fraudster. Over the next few weeks, I eagerly awaited updates from the police and the legal system. It was a bizarre turn of events from my simple desire to enjoy my new motorcycle in peace during the holiday season. As the legal process unfolded, I received a call from the detective in charge of the case. She informed me that the fraudster had been arrested and was facing multiple charges related to credit card fraud and identity theft. Her crimes had not only targeted me, but potentially many others as well. I have always been good with money and I'm careful with it. I also inherited a good chunk to be fair, and I was able to retire last year fairly early as these things go. I am not married and have no children. My sister-in-law asked me to help with her daughter's wedding. This is my brother's stepdaughter. There is no blood relationship. I suppose she is not really my niece, but they call me her uncle. I initially told him I would help, and I was thinking maybe $1,000 or so. I was going to give the same amount as a wedding gift, but they did not know that, so they started booking things and asked if I could give them $15,000. Yes, I could. I just don't want to. I will give $1,000. My sister-in-law started pressuring me for more, and I said no. $1,000 was a nice contribution for a step-uncle, for lack of a better term. She then got angry and called me names and all of that. And this is where I might be a jerk. I told her that the offer of any money is rescinded. I would not give a cent, not attend the wedding, and not give a gift. She called me a jerk and all sorts of other things. My brother called me and apologized for his wife and asked if I would consider $5,000. I told him that I loved him but did not like his wife and that my decision to give nothing stands. He then joined the jerk chorus. Am I the jerk for rescinding my offer to $1,000? And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, not that jerk. Yeah, calling you names was a genius way to get you to contribute more money. I don't blame you for not giving anything at this point. They are acting so entitled to your money. But just because you have money to spend doesn't mean you have to spend it on them. Another commenter adds, I personally would donate $5,000 to charity in their name. Then they will get a nice thank you note. Win-win situation. Not bad, jerk. Okay, so this story happened when I was 6 years old, but my mom retells it so often that the details are ingrained. The daycare was a fun place to be, and the playground was a highlight. There were slides, swings, a jungle gym, and a sandbox, all surrounded by colorful plastic lawn chairs where the kids and the daycare staff would sit and chat. I loved going there, but little did I know that this day would change everything. As I eagerly waited in line for my turn on a slide, I couldn't help but notice a boy named Kyle who was sliding down again and again, without letting anyone else have a chance. It was frustrating because we all wanted a turn to enjoy the slide. Kyle, however, seemed to think the slide was his personal property. I decided to take matters into my own hands. When Kyle reached the bottom of the slide once more, I mustered the courage to climb up and go down myself. But as I reached the bottom, I felt an intense pain on the right side of my face. I didn't understand what had happened at first. All I knew was that I was suddenly in excruciating pain. I started crying, tears mixing with the sand on my face. My vision blurred as I clutched my injured cheek, and I couldn't feel blood trickling down my knee. The world seemed like a scary place at that moment. Kyle, the boy responsible for my pain, wasn't remorseful at all. Instead, he kept trying to make me stop crying, shoving me as if to silence me. The pimples and sand on the playground were unforgiving, and I ended up with scraped knees and hands. It was all too much for a 6-year-old to handle, and I cried even louder. Thankfully, a daycare worker came rushing over, scolding Kyle for his reckless behavior, and she knelt down beside me, cleaning my scraped knees and hands as I continued to sob. I had bloody scrapes on my knees that needed bandages, and my right cheek was cut and bruised. My right eye, the one that had borne the burn of the impact, wouldn't open properly. That's when everything started to change. The daycare worker's attention to my injuries signaled to my mom that something was terribly wrong when she came to pick me up. She saw my bandages and my injured eye, and she was furious. My mom didn't waste a second. She parked her car, stormed into the daycare, and demanded to speak to the staff. Her voice echoed through the building as she yelled, demanding answers about what had happened to her child and why she hadn't been called about my injuries. I remember her shouting, "Who's responsible for this? Why wasn't I informed? What happened to my child?" The daycare staff was taken aback by her rage, and I saw Kyle and his mom getting ready to leave. I pointed at Kyle when my mom asked, "Who is Kyle?" My mom, determined to get to the bottom of this, stormed over to Kyle and his mom. Although I don't recall the exact words exchanged between them, my mom made it abundantly clear that she would make sure they paid for what had happened to me. After that traumatic day, my mom took me straight to the hospital. They took photos of my injuries as evidence, and my mom didn't waste any time in calling the police to file a report and press charges against the daycare for their negligence. My mom, a dedicated sailor in the US Navy, had a lawyer on the case the very next morning. She also reached out to the local news, who were eager to cover the story. The thought of other parents' children being in danger prompted her to take this matter public. Soon enough, parents started pulling their children out of the daycare, fearing for their safety. The once bustling place became eerily quiet as its reputation crumbled. The director of the daycare requested a meeting with my mom a few days later, and in that small office, my mom, her lawyer, and I sat across from her. My mom didn't hold back. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she laid out her terms with unwavering determination. The daycare can either pay for the child's injuries out of court, she stated firmly, or we can let the local news cover the trial when we take this matter to court. The daycare, facing the looming threat of public scrutiny and legal consequences, wisely chose to settle out of court. The amount they paid remains a closely guarded secret, known only to my mom and her lawyer. As the years went by, I visited an optometrist who confirmed the lasting damage to my right eye. It's smaller than my left eye, and my vision in that eye is significantly worse. The physical scars have faded, but the memory of that day still lingers. One thing is for sure though, the daycare that failed to protect its children closed its doors for good the year after I was injured. Justice may have been delayed, but it was ultimately served. So yeah, that's the story of how a 6-year-old me and my fierce mom took on a daycare, sought justice, and brought about the closure of a place that had failed its young charges. It's a story my mom retells with pride, a one that obviously I will never forget. Hey Reddit, I'm new here and I've got a story that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. It all happened back in 2013 and I'm finally sharing it with you fine folks. At the time, my now husband and I were still dating, and one of our regular duties was taking his blind aunt, whom we will call Auntie B, out to lunch. Auntie B was a remarkable woman, 76 years old but full of life and wisdom. She had this incredible outlook on life, and she was genuinely trusting of people, which was both endearing and, as we would later find out, her greatest vulnerability. Now, Auntie B was quite wealthy, having earned a substantial amount of money throughout her lifetime. But despite her wealth, she was always humble and kind, making her an absolute joy to be around. Our routine was simple. Once or twice a week, we pick Auntie B up and take her out for lunch. During those lunches, I pepper her with questions about how she perceived the world and how she managed everyday tasks despite her blindness. She was always more than willing to share her insights, and I cherished those moments. Auntie B had a best friend, a nurse, who played a significant role in her life. She had been there for Auntie B during her health struggles, particularly with diabetes. As Auntie B's condition worsened, she appointed her nurse friend to live with her and provide round-the-clock care. Initially, everything seemed fine, but subtle signs of trouble began to emerge. The first red flag was when Auntie B started receiving calls from creditors and her credit cards began overdrafting. This was odd considering her substantial wealth. Then there was a time when we visited and her refrigerator was stocked with Pepsi despite her insistence on drinking only water. Something just didn't add up. But it wasn't until one day, with Auntie B's health rapidly deteriorating, that things came to a head. We brought her lunch, her favorite, a tuna sandwich cut in half with a side of fries, and I offered to cut the sandwich into smaller pieces so she could eat it more comfortably. But her nurse friend intervened, saying she would take care of it in the kitchen. When we returned with a sandwich, it was still in one piece, and to my shock, there was a massive bite taken out of it. I couldn't believe my eyes. I turned to my boyfriend, now husband, and whispered, "Her sandwich has been bitten into." He was incredulous, but when he looked, Auntie B was already eating it. I couldn't let this slide. I marched to the kitchen and confronted the nurse, who was busy munching on the rest of Auntie B's food. I was furious, demanding an explanation. Her excuse? She thought it was for her, but we had previously offered to buy her food and she had declined. My anger flared and I snatched the sandwich from her hand, leaving her fuming. She tossed the sandwich to the floor and stormed out, muttering something about needing to get more tuna for Auntie B's lunch tomorrow. I couldn't let this injustice stand. I immediately informed my mother-in-law, who happened to be a lawyer. She dug into Auntie B's bank account, and what she discovered was appalling. The nurse had stolen $45,000 from Auntie B's bank account to furnish a new apartment and splurge on clothes and other luxuries. It was a heartless betrayal of trust. We knew we had to take action. The police were called and the nurse reluctantly handed back the stolen credit cards. But she had the audacity to claim that Auntie B had given her permission to use it. Auntie B, hearing the commotion, came out to settle the matter once and for all. "Which? I'm blind," Auntie B exclaimed. "I couldn't see you robbing me, but these kids had told me you ate my sandwich like a ducking monster." So you're fired, he's my nurse and my friend. You're off my well too. Auntie B was unyielding and we were all witnesses to her nurse's deceitful behavior. With Auntie B pressing charges, the nurse was taken into custody and justice began to unfold. She was not only facing legal consequences but also the responsibility to pay back the money she had stolen to the rightful heirs, my husband and his brother. The moral of the story: don't ever steal from the blind, and for heaven's sake, don't eat their food right in front of people who can clearly see you doing it. Auntie B may have been blind, but her insight and strengths of character were unwavering. Thanks for reading, and remember, there is always a lesson to be learned, even in the most unexpected places. Hey, I need to get something off my chest and figure out if I'm the jerk in the situation, so here is a story. My brother, R, and I have never been super close. We're more like distant acquaintances who happen to be related. You know the type. The love-hate relationship. But despite our differences, I'd still do anything for him. My whole family is pretty self-absorbed, so R's actions aren't entirely surprising. What's bothering me now is how my immediate family, including R, treats me and my own little family. Here is what happened. Back in January of 2022, R called to announce that he and his fiancée, L, had finally set a wedding date. Great news, right? Well, there is a twist. They chose a date for their wedding, and guess what? It's on my son's 5th birthday. Now, my wife and I were taken aback by this, and we immediately expressed our concerns to R. We thought it was a bad idea to have their wedding on our son's special day, but the response was something like, "It'll be cool to share a birthday with him," and so on. We should have put our foot down right then, but we didn't. We ended up agreeing to go along with their plans and even agreed to help set up for the wedding. Fast forward to the present, and here is where things get complicated. About 7 months ago, my wife and I decided to make a big change in our lives. We stopped drinking heavily and went on a healthier lifestyle. We started setting healthy boundaries with both our families and cut off contact with R, L, and most of my immediate family. It was a big shift, but it was for the better. Now, about a month before the wedding, L messaged all the bridesmaids about the deposit for hair and makeup. My wife and I sat down to tally up the total cost of everything we still needed to buy for R and L's wedding, and the figure was around $900, not even counting the few things my wife had already purchased. We have 5 kids, and 2 of them had birthday within 5 days of the wedding, with one of them sharing the exact same day as the wedding itself. On top of that, our own anniversary falls just 3 days before R and L's big day, not to mention a holiday celebration. Feeling overwhelmed, I called up my brother to talk to him about how I was feeling. I explained the situation, the financial strain, and how it was all piling up. His response was pretty much a cold, "Okay." That was it. No empathy, no understanding, just a simple "okay." It hurt, but I swallowed my pride and agreed to still attend the wedding, although it meant I wouldn't be spending my son's birthday with him. Now, it seems R hadn't discussed our conversation with L, or maybe she just didn't care. Once all the conversations were had, then my wife announced in the bridal party group chat that she wouldn't need the hair and makeup anymore, and that we wouldn't be using the shared houses they had planned for, since we couldn't stay overnight with our kids attending. L texted in the group, "So, are you not paying your part anymore either for something that you said you wanted done and I've already signed the contract for?" This message really upset me. I told my wife to respond with a more diplomatic approach, saying something like, "You're right, I'm sorry. I'll send you the money on Friday, but I won't be able to attend the wedding anymore." So here I am questioning whether or not I'm the jerk for deciding not to attend my brother's wedding. On one hand, I can understand why my brother and his fiancée might be upset. They have made plans and commitments and now we're backing out. But on the other hand, our circumstances have changed drastically. We're juggling a lot of important events around the same time as their wedding, so am I the jerk for deciding not to attend? I'd appreciate your thoughts and advice on this situation. Thanks. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, "You are the jerk. You and your wife agreed to be at the wedding party. Dropping out a month before the wedding for no good reason is the behavior of jerks. More so when it means other people have to absorb the financial loss. You knew 18 months ago what all the calendar conflicts were. And you've also had all that time to budget, so neither of those issues are legit reasons to cancel. The fact that you've given up drinking should have been freed up extra cash." Another commenter adds, "You are the jerk. You knew the date 18 months prior. If the date was an issue, you shouldn't have accepted to be in the wedding at the time. If money is a reason you're not going, you once again shouldn't have accepted the roles of bridesmaid and groomsman. Your wife should have said no to hair and makeup originally if she didn't want to spend the money. If you weren't planning on spending the night, you should have stated that you didn't need a house when it originally came up. But you two not deciding what you actually wanted, you're costing others money. And as far as your son's birthday, celebrate it another day. When I was younger, my dad was almost always gone on my birthday. He is a deer hunter, and my birthday was often during opening weekend. And I almost always celebrated it another day. I actually didn't mind because it was like I would get 2 birthdays instead of 1. It's all about how you approach that situation." A third commenter goes with, "You are the jerk. You are pulling out of your own brother's wedding 1 month before without any reasonable excuse. I can imagine a few things more hurtful to your sibling relationship. First, I don't think it should really be an issue that the wedding was on your kid's birthday. What cooler way for a 5-year-old to spend their birthday than with all their family eating cake and dancing? It's tough to find dates for weddings. This wasn't a slight to your family. Second, your poor planning isn't your brother's fault. It's your brother's wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime day, and he needs your support. Skip your holiday if you need to. Third, you chose to get offended at totally normal communication, probably out of desire to assuage your own guilt at what is clearly a jerk move. If I were your brother, I don't know if I could ever bring myself to speak to you again." Back in the summer of 2000, our quiet neighborhood was under siege by a group of unruly vandals. These troublemakers took pleasure in vandalizing houses, cars, and practically anything they could get their hands on. It had gotten so bad that my father's prized possession, his Grand National, was a constant target. They would steal the hubcaps, try to break in for the radios, and even snatch loose change left inside. It became such a nuisance that my father had to leave his car unlocked because replacing the shattered windows was getting expensive. The worst part of it all was a lackadaisical response from the police. Whenever we called them for help, they would take their sweet time, often arriving more than 20 minutes later. It was infuriating. I could have walked to the police station in less time than that. By the time the cops got to our place, the miscreants would have vanished into the night, leaving us to clean up the mess and deal with the financial aftermath. My father, who happened to be an engineer by trade, decided that enough was enough. He was determined to give those delinquents a taste of their own medicine. So one day he headed to the local hardware store and picked up some wires, razor blades, and a few car batteries from our garage. What he had in mind was nothing short of diabolical. He began by applying a thin layer of glue to the inside of the car door handles, securing razor blades in place to deter anyone who dared to grasp them. It was a subtle yet effective deterrent. Next, he stripped some wires and wound them tightly around the hubcaps, ensuring they were in direct contact with the metal. For an added touch of evil genius, he suspended another wire slightly above the hubcaps using a combination of tape and glue. This way, if anyone attempted to touch the hubcaps, the wire would complete the circuit, delivering either a painful shock or a nasty burn. With patient and meticulous attention to detail, my father managed to rig the entire setup before running the wires back to the car batteries. Once everything was in place, he connected them and retreated inside the house, his heart pounding with anticipation. As night fell, my father left the window slightly ajar, allowing him to listen for any signs of the troublemakers. It didn't take long. Sometime after midnight, those little delinquents returned, emboldened by the cover of darkness. They probably thought they were in for another easy score, but they had no idea what awaited them. My father's voice boomed from the darkness, shouting warnings that would make anyone think twice about their life choices. Startled and frightened, the vandals scrambled to escape, their hasty footsteps echoing down the street. Morning revealed a gruesome scene. Bloodstains surrounded the car door handles, with a trail leading down the driveway. One of the hubcaps showed signs of melting, likely from the heat generated by the wire. The others remained untouched. It was a sight that made it clear that vandals had learned a painful lesson. After that night, those troublemakers never returned to our neighborhood again. They must have shared their terrifying experience with others, spreading the word that our quiet street was not to be trifled with. While I wished we had a security system with a camera to capture their expressions as they encountered my father's ingenious traps, there was satisfaction in knowing that justice had been painfully served. Our quiet neighborhood could finally breathe easy again, thanks to my father's resourcefulness and determination. The vandals may have thought they could terrorize us, but they had underestimated the resilience of a community that was willing to protect its own.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.